Snow pounds Frost Ridge on Christmas night, and the wind chews at every seam. Radio static rides the gusts and snaps like ice in a glass. The base feels small under the white noise of the storm. Sergeant Michael Patterson, an E5 squad leader, calls in that his 9-person recon element is pinned on the West Ridge. A hostile sniper owns the high ground, and any move draws instant fire. They are holding in a shallow cut of rock and running short on choices. Inside the command space, Major Claire Reynolds, the battalion S3 operations officer, leans over a topographic map spread with grease pencil notes. Staff Sergeant David Chen, the communications NCO-IC, boosts the signal and keeps the nets clean so only the essentials make it through. Voices stay calm, clipped, and clear. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison recommends rescue at first light since the winds and icing make small unmanned aircraft unsafe. Gusts chew across the ridgeline and turn visibility into a gray sheet. Ground crews stand by but know the weather calls the pace. A forward observer team sits between the base and the ridge to feed precise grid and elevation. They glass the slope with a laser rangefinder and a vehicle-mounted FLIR, not long-range thermal that snow would swallow. The hostile sniper is roughly 2,600 meters out, with about 400 meters of elevation advantage. The room tightens around the facts and the storm keeps pressing. Any careless move pulls fire, and 9 lives hang on the right call. Frost Ridge needs precise, long-range overwatch, the kind that speaks once and ends the fight. The morning bites hard at the outdoor range, a steady chill near -8 degrees. Frost traces steel and breath hangs in short clouds that vanish on the wind. Sergeant Mark Briggs, the range NCO, walks the line and checks safety flags with a practiced eye. Targets stand at 1,200 meters across pale snow. Most shooters run the Mk-13, Mod 7-chambered in .300, Winchester Magnum with solid bipods. Optics sit tight with proper torque and no loose caps. Corporal Jake Henderson and Private Emma Walsh trade a look when Lance Corporal Avery Hale shoulders her rifle. A pink accent on a removable sling and a bolt knob cover catches light, and both pieces come off before any mission. Hale stays on task and sets her body behind the rifle. She builds natural point of aim and settles into a clean prone. She confirms dope with a quick check of her data card and past groups. A Kestrel 5,700 rides in her palm as she reads wind and logs, temperature and pressure. The crosswind holds near 16 miles per hour, with small gusts that arrive without warning. Hale dials elevation and windage in mils and waits for the next steady lull. 2 rounds break smooth and land center at distance. The spotter marks them, nods once, and keeps glass on the target backer. A small gust touches the 3rd shot and prints about 0.8 mil left. The spotter logs the miss distance and the wind change without any extra words. Major Claire Reynolds watches from behind the line with a neutral face. Later she asks about the accent in a quiet corner of the lot. Hale explains that it honors her sister Rebecca, a rescue specialist who died in a blizzard years ago. She adds that concealment always comes first in the field, so the accent stays off for operations. Range etiquette holds from first brief to final clear. Shooter and spotter roles stay clean, and calls remain short and useful. Hale packs the rifle with the same calm she brought to the line. The cold carries a thin edge, and the space between skill and judgment lingers in the wind. Wind claws at the roof of the command center while snow stacks in drifts. Radios hiss and pop as Christmas night turns into a white wall. Inside, people move with calm hands and short voices. Major Claire Reynolds, the battalion S3 operations officer, stands over a topographic map. Grease pencil marks show routes, danger areas, and the ridgeline. Staff Sergeant David Chen, the communications NCOIC, trims the nets so only what matters gets through. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison watches the gusts build on the weather feed and shakes her head. Small unmanned aircraft would ice up and fall in this air. She recommends rescue at first light when the sky might give them a window. A forward observer team sits in the fold between Frost Ridge and the high ground. They feed precise grid and elevation with a laser rangefinder and a vehicle-mounted FLIR. They do not trust long-range thermal through snowfall because snow eats heat at distance. The tactical picture hardens as updates land. The hostile sniper holds a vantage point about 2,600 meters out, with roughly 400 meters of elevation advantage. The angle gives them clean lines across the rock cleft where the squad is pinned. Ground winds run near 18 miles per hour and flick like a whip across the flats. Mid-slope winds ride between 30 and 38 knots and shear across the ridge. Long-duration flight in that mix would be reckless. Sergeant Michael Patterson and his 9-person element huddle in broken stone while rounds chip ice. Any movement draws fire from the high gun. They keep radio calls brief to avoid painting themselves with their own noise. Command and control stays crisp. The battalion commander, a lieutenant colonel, has delegated execution authority to Major Reynolds, and she keeps transmissions short and clear. Decisions step off the map and into action without speeches. The room settles on the only clean lane left. No drones tonight. Overwatch from the North Tower becomes the plan if a qualified shooter and a steady spotter can read the wind and hold the element safe until first light. Lance Corporal Avery Hale steps forward into the tight circle of maps and radios. She asks to take Overwatch from the North Tower and keeps her voice even. The room shifts as heads turn from the storm noise to the numbers. Sergeant Mark Briggs questions the range and the shifting wind that walks across the ridge. He lays out the concern in clean terms and then states that he will serve as spotter if the plan is approved. The challenge lands like a test, and the commitment lands right after it. Hale lists what she needs and nothing extra. She asks for precise grid and elevation from the forward observer team. Density altitude, layered wind by terrain band, and a clean line of fire with no friendlies under the path. She adds that all pink accents are removed for field use to protect camouflage. She states the platform as a McMillan TAC-50 chambered in .50 BMG that is under evaluation for extreme long range. The rifle offers the mass and ballistic profile required for the shot if the wind gives them a window. She confirms the rifle is zeroed, torqued, and ready. Her workflow comes next with quiet confidence. A Kestrel 5700 paired with applied ballistics will capture temperature, pressure, and humidity to compute density altitude. She will dial elevation in mils, hold primary wind in mils, and account for Coriolis and spindrift as secondary factors. Rules of engagement are confirmed in simple language. Positive identification through the forward observer team is mandatory, and safety backstop must be clear. Communications will stay tight with call signs, brevity words, and a synchronized time hack, so every call lands once and only once. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison outlines ground deconfliction in short points. The forward observer team verifies the target grid and elevation again and confirms they can mark any movement that threatens the element. The plan keeps the lane clean for a single long shot followed by selective cover as needed. Major Claire Reynolds grants conditional approval as the Battalion S3. Staff Sergeant David Chen stabilizes the nets and trims chatter to the bone. The green light moves a shooter and a spotter toward the North Tower while the storm rattles the doors and the clock runs. The North Tower sits in the teeth of the storm. Lance Corporal Avery Hale lies prone behind a McMillan TAC-50 chambered in .50 BMG with a steady bipod up front and a quiet monopod settling the rear. Sergeant Mark Briggs sets a sturdy tripod and levels the spotting scope. A laser rangefinder rides his support hand while he keeps the eyepiece clean of blowing snow. They run the checklist without hurry. Zero and bore alignment are confirmed. Dope matches the last known conditions. And a fresh range card starts to fill with neat lines and numbers. Hale powers a Kestrel 5700 paired with applied ballistics and captures temperature, pressure, and humidity. Density altitude drops into the device and the solution begins to take shape on the card. Elevation is logged in mils and double-checked. Briggs breaks the wind by layer and calls likely gusts, while Hale writes primary and contingency wind holds in mils for each band of terrain. Communications get a final scrub. Call signs are set. Brevity is agreed. And a synchronized time hack turns every clock into the same beat, so calls land clean and once. Safety sits on top of every step. The backstop is clear. The forward observer team confirms positive identification with a vehicle-mounted FLIR, and the line of fire is deconflicted by Lieutenant Sarah Morrison on the ground. IR discipline holds across the board. No visible lasers. No light spills. No careless glow that might paint the tower against the storm. Every bright accent is gone from the rifle. The pink sling cover and the bolt knob piece stay locked in a pouch, because camouflage takes priority in the field. Hale settles the stock into her shoulder and zeroes her natural point of aim. She works a slow breath and checks that the trigger press will move straight and smooth. Briggs keeps glass on the ridge and tracks the shimmer of wind near the rocks. He notes small breaks and marks them on the range card in pencil that still writes when cold. They run the list one more time with quiet hands. Staff Sergeant David Chen keeps the nets clean so the next call will not fight for air, and the tower holds its breath for a clear shot window. Cold air climbs the tower and settles into every seam of the platform. Lance Corporal Avery Hale reads temperature, pressure, and humidity on a Kestrel 5700 paired with applied ballistics. Numbers roll into density altitude and the firing solution begins to form. Sergeant Mark Briggs watches the ridge through the spotting scope and breaks the wind into layers. He takes the forward observer reports and matches them with the mirage that shivers near the tower. Each band of air gets its own note on the range card. Hale sets the rifle and dials elevation in mils for the McMillan TAC-50 inches .50 BMG. She verifies the come up against her dope and checks that the bubble sits level. The rifle settles into her shoulder like a tool she knows well. Primary wind goes to a firm hold in mils. Hale plans for gusts with a small bracket and keeps a secondary note for a light shift. Coriolis and spin drift sit as minor corrections after the wind. The tactical picture stays simple and clear. The hostile sniper is about 2,600 meters out with roughly 400 meters of elevation advantage. The ground element will move the moment the first round lands. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison keeps radio traffic clean and trims every extra word. She confirms that no friendly movement will cut under the line of fire. Her voice turns the net into a quiet room. The forward observer team confirms grid and elevation again, with a laser rangefinder and a vehicle-mounted FLIR. They report gusts easing on the ridge and a brief softening along the face. Briggs marks the dip on the card and circles it for emphasis. Hale builds a 5-second window from wind behavior rather than luck. She watches the lull repeat and finds the rhythm that sits between pulses. Breath moves slow and steady as the timing locks in. Major Claire Reynolds grants a final green light with a short call that carries weight. Briggs cues Hale to settle her breathing and hold the center of the reticle. The next inhale will open the window and start the shot. The north tower holds steady against the wind while the storm scrapes across the metal. Lance Corporal Avery Hale settles behind the McMillan TAC-50 and .50 BMG. Cheek weld set. Stock firm. Eyes calm on the scope. Sergeant Mark Briggs owns the spotting scope and tracks the ridge for a repeat in the gust pattern. He calls a 5-second window based on the forward observer updates and the small pause he sees in the shimmer of air. Hale finds a natural respiratory pause and lets the world narrow. Trigger press moves straight to the rear with no lateral drag. Her eyes stay on glass to ride the shot all the way in. The round leaves the barrel with a deep, controlled note that vanishes into snow and wind. Time of flight runs near 6 to 7 seconds at this distance. The trace bends through layered wind like a thread pulled tight. The camera lives on the target ridge about 2,600 meters away, with roughly 400 meters of elevation advantage. Rock cuts and drifts make pockets of shadow. The angle gives the hostile shooter long sightlines over the cleft. Impact lands clean on the target position. Briggs calls impact center and confirms target collapse, while Hale keeps the reticle steady for a second look. No one cheers on the gun and no one breaks focus. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison keeps the net clear with short acknowledgments and no wasted words. Major Claire Reynolds sends a single approval that closes the loop and then lets silence work. Sergeant Michael Patterson positions his 9-person element to move the instant the shot hits. They use cover and folds in the terrain and save every breath for motion, not victory. Sniper etiquette holds like a rule carved in steel. Positive identification stays constant through the forward observer team. Hale prepares for a second round if the picture shifts or another threat shows. The squad begins to break contact under the shelter of overwatch. Hale stays on glass and watches for any movement that could cut across their route. Briggs tracks the wind again and marks another small lull in case they need one more shot. Hale holds the scope as the ridge settles after the first impact. Snow swirls, then thins, and the target area clears enough to read small movements. Her cheek stays on the stock while breath eases into a steady rhythm. Briggs keeps the spotting scope locked on, likely approaches. He calls a small correction in Mills for a shift that slides along the mid-slope. Hale acknowledges with a quiet click and keeps eyes on glass. The forward observer team feeds fresh grid references and short movement cues from their position in the fold. Vehicle-mounted FLIR confirms shapes before any shot is considered. Positive identification stays the rule that everything rests on. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison trims radio traffic and blocks any friendly motion under the line of fire. She keeps the route open for Patterson without stepping on other nets. Every word counts, and dead air is a tool. Patterson moves his 9-person element by bounds with cover first in mind. They favor rock and shadow and use brief smoke only when the wind will hold it in place. Each rush is short and ends in a good piece of ground. Briggs calls the next hold in Mills and adds a contingency for a quick gust. Hale sends one necessary round and watches for effect before touching the bolt. Cadence stays measured, so the shot shapes the fight without overshooting. Staff Sergeant David Chen keeps the nets clean and strips away anything that does not move the plan. Major Claire Reynolds maintains the operational picture and resists the urge to micromanage. The team does its work while leadership keeps the frame steady. Rules of engagement stay front and center with target discrimination and safety backstop checks before every trigger press. The rifle speaks only when all boxes are marked. The silence between shots is part of the control. The enemy element begins to lose cohesion as key threats go quiet. Patterson clears the danger area with his people intact and sets a final bound towards safer ground. Hale stays on glass, conserves ammunition, and watches the ridge for any last motion that might need one more clean round. First light creeps over Frost Ridge and turns the storm into thin veils of fog. Patterson's 9-person element links up at the outer cordon with a steady pace and clean spacing. The gate team moves them inside without drama. At the rally point, they run standard checks, like it is any other cold morning. Accountability is confirmed by name and number, while gear gets a fast once-over. Ammunition tallies are logged in a pocket notebook and sent up the chain. Medical screening follows with simple steps done well. Corpsmen look for cold exposure, blistered skin, and small cuts hidden under gloves. Hot drink and dry socks appear like a promise kept. Patterson squares away his people and walks to the base of the tower. He meets Lance Corporal Avery Hale near the stairs and offers a brief thank you that sounds like work, not ceremony. Hale answers with a quiet acknowledgement and a nod. Christmas lights still glow against damp eaves as the wind eases to a whisper. The base looks softer than it did at night, and the snow holds a clean shine. It feels like the building itself is taking a breath. Inside the command space, Major Claire Reynolds keeps the radio net calm while a short after-action update takes shape. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison provides the ground picture in 2 clean paragraphs. Staff Sergeant David Chen notes comms performance and a few small fixes for next time. Across the yard, Corporal Jake Henderson finds Hale by a stack of ammo cans. He offers a short apology that centers on results and respect. Private Emma Walsh adds a few plain words about judgment and learning. Hale accepts without inviting speeches and gets back to simple tasks. She clears the tower firing point with Briggs and signs the log. The rifle goes into a clean case and the card goes into a sleeve. A small wooden rose sits on a bench near the door with fresh snow on its petals. Hale picks it up and turns it in her hand, then slips it into a pocket where it will not get wet. The air smells like cold iron and pine. She stands still for one slow minute and lets the quiet do its work. The bass hum returns as generators settle into a steady rhythm. Hale heads back to duties with the measured stride of someone who knows the job is never finished. The mess hall smells like coffee and cold gear drying near the heaters. Marines form up by squad while Christmas lights glow along the rafters. The room is quiet, not heavy, just steady. Major Claire Reynolds steps to the front as the battalion S3 operations officer. She delivers a concise after-action summary that covers time, place, mission, and results. Lessons learned are stated in plain talk and logged for follow-up. The battalion commander, a lieutenant colonel, stands beside her and endorses recognition through the proper channels. No music, no long speech, only the weight of the work. Heads are held level and boots stay planted. Orders are read aloud for the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal with the combat device. The citation notes disciplined overwatch that enabled a safe extraction under winter conditions and complex winds. The language stays professional and exact. A staff officer steps forward with the medal while a senior Marine pins it on with careful hands. The safety back is checked and the ribbon lies flat. Applause runs short and respectful, then fades. Major Reynolds confirms that Lance Corporal Avery Hale is assigned as the Advanced Long-Range Marksmanship Instructor for the battalion. Authority, schedule, and range control, coordination will run through the S3 for clean tasking. The expectation is clear and the purpose is service. Sergeant Michael Patterson steps from the ranks with a small wooden rose painted a soft pink. He presents it as a keepsake from his 9-person element, set apart from official recognition. Hale accepts it with a nod and tucks it away. Corporal Jake Henderson offers a brief acknowledgement that centers on performance and standards. Private Emma Walsh adds a quiet line about judgment and learning. The words are short, the meaning is clear, and the line closes. The formation breaks without noise or drama. Marines return tables to their places and stow chairs against the wall. The mess hall shifts back to work rhythms while the lights keep a warm edge on the morning. Hale secures the medal in a small case and wraps the wooden rose in a dry cloth. She checks the training board for the next block and heads for the range office. The day moves forward the way good days do, with purpose and calm. Morning settles on the range with clean light and colder air. Lance Corporal Avery Hale gathers a small group from the battalion and lays out the block in simple steps. The goal is repeatable hits at distance under real conditions. She starts with the base that never changes. Natural point of aim, steady position behind the rifle, and a clean trigger press that moves straight to the rear. Cheek weld and sight picture stay the same shot to shot. Tools come next with a clear workflow. Students confirm dope from recent shoots and write it where they can reach it. Elevation and wind are handled in mills to keep calls fast and precise. Hale teaches how to read mirage near the target and around the gun. The class learns to separate background shimmer from true wind and to spot small lulls. They put those cues on a simple range card. She runs a Kestrel 5700 with applied ballistics in real time. Temperature, pressure, and humidity flow into density altitude, so the solver stays honest. Students match the solution to their dope and note any offsets. Wind is framed as the factor that matters most once distance grows. Spindrift and Coriolis are real, but they live behind wind in priority. The class builds primary holds with brackets for gusts rather than chasing every flicker. Communication between shooter and spotter stays short and clear. Calls like send it, on glass, impact, and correction in mills keep the team in one rhythm. Positive identification, safety, backstop, rules of engagement, and clean radio habits are treated as non-negotiable. Hale keeps the tone humble and focused. She notes that any pink accent is a personal token for training spaces only, and never on a fielded rifle where camouflage and discipline come first. The group understands that precision comes from numbers, repetition, and purpose. And the next evolution begins on the line. New Year's Eve settles over Frost Ridge with a soft glow. The mess hall fills in ones and twos, boots stamped dry and voices low. A small toast rises and fades like steam. Work carries on at the edges. Someone wipes a table and another checks a roster. Christmas lights hang along the beams and make the room feel warmer than the air. No speeches follow the toast. Marines nod and return cups to a bin. The place sounds like a ship at anchor, steady and sure. Lance Corporal Avery Hale steps outside for a breath that fogs and disappears. Snow creaks under her weight and the night smells clean. The noise from inside becomes a gentle hum. Major Claire Reynolds joins her without a word. Sergeant Michael Patterson and Sergeant Mark Briggs drift over and stand nearby. Corporal Jake Henderson and Private Emma Walsh fill the last bit of space. They share the kind of quiet that comes after hard work done right. A hand touches a shoulder and then drops. Heads tilt toward the sky where the stars try to show through. Hale thinks of her sister Rebecca and the long winter road that led here. She holds the small wooden rose that Patterson's element carved and painted. She tucks it safely into a pocket lined with cloth. At midnight, the cheer rolls out of the mess hall and across the snow. The group turns and goes back inside together. The lights catch their faces and make them look a little less tired. Morning finds the range before the schedule begins. Hale checks position and breath and glass, then sends a clean round that snaps and fades into the hills. The card gets a neat new line. Practice returns like muscle memory. Purpose feels quiet and steady instead of loud and bright. Courage can wear any color, but in the field it looks like preparation, teamwork, and a Marine doing the job.